There you go. He was cold. He was cold. Ooh. Pretty little thing. So guys, look, today I want to talk to you about a bait that y'all have heard me talk about in the past. It's a dart head minnow, okay? And we kind of made this thing work before the whole shaking minnows and all that stuff was cool and popular with the forward facing sonar. But you know, either case, if you're pond fishing this time of year, it can be extremely tough. And the reason I say this is I only come to these ponds a couple times a year. And when I come, I want to catch them, you know, in ways that I typically couldn't. But a lot of times this time of year, that just isn't possible. But this bait right here gets a ton of bites. I'm going to break the whole setup and everything down for you, so you can go to your pond or your lake or wherever you prefer to go this time of year and catch a lot of fish. So stay tuned. This is something you don't want to miss. So jumping into it, guys, there's a couple things you need to know about when you're throwing this rig. Like, one of the biggest things is being able to feel those bites, because during the winter you've got those real lethargic fish that they typically don't just hammer a bait most of the time. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, but 99% of the time they're not just absolutely just hammering the bait. So you need to be able to feel those bites. So the first thing I want to talk about is basically my setup, right? Because you guys know when I've talked about the dart head before in the past, I'm using an ultralight setup. But this time of year, I like going with a medium heavy, and it's not necessarily all the action that matters and stuff. You can kind of mitigate like the fast action and make it a lot more moderate by just loosening your drag. So having that drag really, really low, okay? So like, you know, typically if I've got this drag set up pretty tight, I've got it now where I can kind of just grab it with these these fingers and just barely pull it, and you know, the drag comes out. So, you know, just like a couple of clicks off your drag, loosening up that drag. That way when you pull into that fish, you're typically not going to lose it because everything's so stiff. Now, the most important thing is going to be the head, right? So I buy the Kaolin darter head jigs. You know, whatever you want to buy, you can buy whatever you want. Just make sure it's a darter head jig. But you're not necessarily going to be shaking this bait like you typically would, like, you know, like the freeloader or something like that. If I do, it's usually like a very, very slight twitch, like I'm barely just moving it to kind of get that fish to like turn and look or something like that. But you know, 99% of the time they're going to fall or hit this bait as it's pendulum back to the boat. So what I mean by that, whether you're bank fishing or whether you're you know, fishing in a boat in a pond, or if you're even out on your lake, I'm going to throw this bait out there, and as soon as it hits the water, I'm going to click the bell, and I'm going to let that bait just drift back to the boat. And as it's drifting back to the boat, I'm going to give it a little shake every now and again. I'm not doing a whole lot with it, and most of the time when they hit it, it's just kind of like if you let a little bit of slack in your line and you don't see your line moving, then you pretty much know they've got it, or either you're going to feel them initially hit that bait. But with the head setup, it kind of all depends on wind, okay? So if I've got a lot of wind, then I'm not really going to be throwing anything like the 1/4 ounce or something like that. I'm not going to be throwing those super small dart heads. I'm typically going to go something like, you know, a 3/8 ounce or something kind of close to that. That way I can throw into that wind and make those accurate casts. 99% of the time when it's not windy, I'm going to be throwing something like that 1/4 ounce. That 1/4 ounce just kind of has like that perfect fall rate, because a lot of times this time of year, these fish are not going to be like right up against the bank. If you're in a pond, they're going to be typically in the deepest part of your pond. So being able to slowly get that bait down there to them and keep it in that area by tight lining it back to the boat or back to the bank, you're typically going to get a lot more bites because you're in that strike zone for a very, very long time. Now, as you see on here, I've got the Zoom Tiny Fluke, and I'm going to show you exactly how I rig it. It's super simple, guys. So like all these baits, I'm going to show you a couple different baits that you can put on this darter head, but one of the main things is, you know, you don't have to make this like super straight. It doesn't have to be like perfect all the way to a T, because it's just kind of pendulum back to the boat. It's just doing this. That's all it's doing. It doesn't really have any movement or anything. But I'm going to go through the head, and I'm going to go about halfway down that bait, come right out the middle, and then push it up, okay? How I kind of judge this about where I need to come out is when that head is about, you know, kind of the length of the tip of my index finger, and then I know I can pull it through, and bam, that bait's set up nice, kind of straight. It's got a little bow to it, but nothing bad. But it's just a great way to catch a ton of fish. Now, there's another minnow style bait that I really like to throw on the darter head, and that's going to be that Damiki armor shad, okay? Now, this bait is a little bit more stiff than the Zoom Tiny Fluke, okay? The Zoom Tiny Fluke, they're typically kind of bent up out of the pack. I don't know what's going on with Zoom, but I don't really like the baits being bent up and stuff out of the pack, and I've kind of, you know, narrowed it down to where the armor shad's like the next best thing. But, you know, if you're dealing with that super clear water, you guys that fish these Highland reservoirs know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you're dealing with a pond that's super clear, maybe it's, you know, maybe it's a 25-foot pond, you know, it's got a good depth to it, but it's super clear water, a lot of bluff wall surrounding it or something like that. Something like that Damiki armor shad's gonna be perfect. Now the colors just kind of vary. If I've got shad in my lake or my pond, then I'm typically gonna be mimicking that because that's typically what the fish are gonna be chasing. Now if not, 99% of the time you can bet there's brim in there. So keeping something natural like, you know, the Zoom Tiny Fluke in the green pumpkin color, you can take a little bit of chartreuse, dye the tail, whatever you need to do. Y'all see me do that during the spring, but 99% of it's going to be that presentation, that slow, just letting it fall back to the boat, kind of shaking it every now and again. That's going to be your ticket. Now the next one is going to be that robo worm. So any kind of Ned that you want to use, whether that's the Z-Man, the Yum, the robo worm, whatever the case may be, those are great options too. Now with these, what happens is when you throw it out with that darter head, it's just a straight, just straight to the bottom. That's it. It's just a straight fast rate fall. Now when can this be productive? When the fish are stacked up against the bottom and they're right under your boat. It's a great way to get down right in those fish, and when this bait hits, it's going to hit the ground and it's going to fall, okay? Typically with your Ned worm, it's going to stand straight up. You're going to hop it, it's going to stand straight up, stuff like that. With this, it's actually going to fall over, so that sometimes that little bit of different action as you're using that bait can trigger a ton more bites. So guys, if you're fishing a pond or you're fishing a lake that is extremely tough this time of year and you're having a hard time getting bites, make sure to use that technique and let me know what you think. I promise you won't regret it. It's a great way to catch a ton of fish. Super cheap. I mean, if you lose a bunch, that's one of the things. Now if you're fishing around a lot of wood and a lot of rock, it's going to get hung up a lot, okay? It's a darter head, it has no weed guard or anything like that, so there is that part to it, but you're going to get a ton of bites. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. See you next time.